Okay, welcome everyone to the first of the quarterly artist talks of 2026. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Shannon. I'm WVA's executive director, and I'm excited for our first one of these. I'm going to start at the top of the state and move down. So we're going to start with our North chapter member. And just to give you a quick lay of the land, how we are going to do this, each artist is going to present for approximately 15 minutes ish. I've got 30 minutes set aside at most for each artist. So after they're done presenting, 15, 20 minutes tops, then we'll have time for Q&A. I'm sure I'll have questions and all of you guys can pick their brains as well. So with that said, I would love to introduce Shea Schachameyer, our North chapter member.
Um, I'm Shea Schachameyer, and I just recently joined this organization, so it's fun to join your video meeting tonight. And thanks for letting me present about my art.
Yeah, we're happy to
And
have
with that, I'm going to share my screen. Um, Here I go. Okay, can you all see my slideshow? Okay, great. Um, so I am a textile artist. I combine my commitment to social justice with my creativity as a textile artist and quilter. And with roots as a community organizer, my place-based work seeks to connect people to the times, places, and experience that give them a feeling of belonging and connection to this beautiful, devastating world. Um, I grew up in Milwaukee and a little over 10 years ago moved up here to Lake Superior and live in Washburn, which is part of like the Bayfield Ashland communities as well. And so water has like always been central in my life, either Lake Michigan or now Lake Superior. And so water is a theme that shows up in a lot of my work. So there's just a picture of me and my mom and my grandma. My mom and my grandma, my great grandma were all quilters. My mom still quilts. And that just started me on this path. And so, growing up in a household with just all these handmade blankets and getting the comfort that they provided, has just stayed with me. And that's something that I carry forward in my work as well. So the quilt that's on the colorful one was the first quilt I ever made, and I made it sometime in elementary school, probably around fifth grade. It's currently on my kid's bed, so it was like in active use. But my mom is an artist, and so I was also introduced to, I was like going to art museums with her at an early age, and she introduced me to the quilters of Gee's Bend, who are a group of Black women that do very improvisationally based quilts using materials that they had on hand. And that style, like as a young kid, really resonated with me. I never knew really that there was like a right and a wrong way to make a quilt. Um, and and I also don't believe that that's true. But for me, I just really identified with the improvisational aspects of putting fabric together, and texture has always been a big component or thing that I consider as well. The blanket next to it is crocheted, and I made that as an adult as like a large bed size blanket that was the same crochet stitch as one of my baby blankets as a kid. So that's just some of my history. A lot of the work that I do is place-based, and I use maps in my work. I have a background in water science and have worked in natural resources for some years. But more than that, I'm just a like map nerd, and I love adventuring and finding new places to explore. And I love how maps just tell story as well. And so This was a baby blanket that I made for a dear friend of mine, and it is of the Little Sioux River, which is up here, and incorporates the um, topographical features of the landscape. And it was land that they owned, and so just had a really special meaning. And I made this for them, and I loved it so much that I was like, I want to keep making more of these map-based quilts. So one of the next ones that I made was this one of the northern part of Isle Royale, Rock Harbor, which is in Lake Superior. And this one I showed at the um, what was it? Minnesota Quilt Show, and it won a ribbon, and then was accepted into QuiltCon, which is one of the most competitive modern quilt shows in the US. And so it was able to be in that show in 2025. But around the same time, I was going through some health stuff, and I started making these really small textile art pieces. And so these are, um, well, these specifically are six inches each, but working really small, like 6 to 12 inches, and using them as a way of like expression, kind of like a diary to like capture what I was feeling in that day, and have a place to put it down. And this process of just expression and totally letting go of perfectionism, not caring at all if anybody ever saw these, that like these were for myself, was just really freeing, and has influenced me to like both keep working small and challenge myself to like use different techniques and let go of some of the perfectionism that I can have in my other work. And with this, I started to like play with incorporating maps into these small pieces. And so this piece I made from memory about my experience going to the Standing Rock um, like demonstrations in 2016 or so. And yeah, I made it from memory thinking about like where I was on that landscape, experiences that I had, people that I met, and collaged it together. And I love this piece. It's one of the ones I keep on my wall here. But from this piece, I was hooked on exploring more like map-based textiles in this like small form. And so then I looked at a map of the actual area that Standing Rock was in and was like, huh, my memory wasn't so great. This was like from memory. And then this was from the map. And I loved that. And I love the piece that I did for memory. But with this piece, I essentially created stencils and started like layering fabric and then stitching it down and adding embellishments and making very accurate uh, representations of these places. And I tell people, like, both from these smaller places and my quilts, like, you can navigate from them. I wouldn't suggest that they be your only map that you bring on a trip, but they are very accurate. And so, yeah, again, this one is Upstanding Rock, and um, and it's just, yeah, I think shows a different part of that story, in part because it includes the Missouri River. Um, these two pieces I will have um in the show at the Center for Visual Arts in Wausau. These two were accepted. And both of these are from that area. The one in pink is just right outside of Wausau, and it's of the Big Rib River. And the next one is of a section of the Wisconsin River that I just found fascinating. It's in Plover, Wisconsin. And the one of plover, so the grayscale one, is all cut by hand using that like stencil technique and then adding like quilted details. But for the one of the Big Rib River that's like pink, I started experimenting. I got a die cutting machine and started experimenting with doing my designs in Illustrator and then exporting them to that machine and having a machine cut them out. And that has been a really fun experiment. It's continued to evolve, and last month I got a membership to the Duluth Maker Space and started using their laser cutter. And it's a totally different sort of animal, but it's been really fun to make just incredibly intricate cut fabric designs. And I'm excited to uh, keep working with those in the coming year. Their laser cutter is also very large scale. It's maybe like 4 feet by 3 feet. And so it's going to allow me to do some bigger work, which also feels exciting.
Mhm.
Um, and with the, as when, let's see, pretty early on when I started making these map pieces, I realized they like really resonate with people. And I was brought into this textile art show and asked if I would contribute 3 pieces to it here in Washburn. And I felt like that was just a really great opportunity to like tell a specific story through my art. And so I focused on drawing on my like social justice background. I chose to tell the story of the threat of the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline on our waters, lands, and communities here in northern Wisconsin, and the current resistance of the Bad River Band in trying to shut down and remove that pipeline from their watershed. And so this piece, the river is the Bad River or the Mishkazebe River, which translates to Medicine River. And the red line shows where the pipeline crosses through. And the different colors of river, the different purple layers, I cut out from different aerial photos. One aerial photo is from 1953 when the pipeline was built. Another was from 2017, and then the last image was maybe like 2022. And so it shows just how these wild rivers naturally move and create these meanders and change and shift over time, and that's what they're supposed to do. But in this instance, right now there's less than 12 feet between the riverbank and where Line 5 is, and it just poses an incredible threat to the waterways in Lake Superior. Um, so I made 3 pieces in that series for the show and then have continued to build that body of water protector work. So this is another piece that I made earlier this year. It's 18 inches by 18 inches, and it qualifies as a quilt because I did not stretch it over canvas. And it has a back and it has batting. And for this, I also used just my own die cutting machine. And so the blue of Lake Superior and then all the rivers is one continuous piece of fabric that I cut out and then finished cutting out with scissors. And then it's all sewn down. This one, it was one of my first experiments using that laser cutter. And I really liked, with this one, adding just some more writing to it. And I really like this play between having like very precise, accurate map work and then kind of like rough, um, I don't know, more like punk style or something, other aspects to my work and just like that tension it creates. So I received an open fund grant this past year through which is a Wisconsin grant program funded in part from the Ruth Arts Foundation. And one of the projects it funded was curating an art show called For the Love of Water. And it is six of us artists in the Great Lakes that all work in different mediums, but whose work focuses on water and tells the story of like water protection. And uh, our show is currently on display in Madison at the Art Lit Lab. This past weekend, we just had our like opening reception, and we showed the film, the Bad River film, and had a community silk screening day, which was really great. But it's a very powerful show, and if you're in the Madison area, I would recommend you check it out. And that's it.
Beautiful.
Can
I
I
love
ask
your
the
work.
first question? Does anyone mind? I am dying to know. So, particularly on that piece that you showed that has a bunch of teeny tiny little tributaries, and you said, oh, it's all one piece of blue. Are you doing that with are you sewing that on with a sewing machine or by hand? How are you doing those tiny details?
Yeah, that is sewn on with a sewing machine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane to me. Wow, that's a lot of patience and
Did you,
talent. Wow.
did you use any kind of like like a tack glue kind of to hold it in place, or how did you?
Yeah, I do use like a fusible that's
Mhm.
ironed onto the back of the fabric, and so it helps to stabilize it. And then the kind I use sometimes it will have a paper backing, and so it'll like I'll cut that out and then be able to peel that paper backing out and then iron it on to the fabric below. So that helps a lot. It's still like a very finicky process.
So how does the? I'm trying to imagine. I don't know much about a die cutters. I just think of like as cutting like a circle, like kind of like a. But how does a die cutter compare to like a laser cutter? And how?
Yeah. So the kind that I have, and maybe it's not quite the right terminology, but it's like the craft cutters, like the Cricut
I don't know.
cutting machines that people use. It uses a blade and it cuts designs out. And so people can like get them to make vinyl stickers with, for instance. Very few people use them for fabric because as you could imagine, like it tends to like want to rip or like,
Mm.
there's some finesse with it.
Is it digitally driven or do you manually
Driven.
operate it?
Yeah,
It's
so I
driven.
connect it with my computer
Oh,
and have like exported a file from Illustrator
okay.
that's essentially a CAD file.
Mhm.
And then the machine, both that machine and the laser cutter, take that file and cut it out.
And then on the piece that you had, the one you said kind of was a little punky, with were you referring to the hand embroidered, like the kind of
Yeah.
like the contrast of that hand embroidery versus the crispness. I really liked that a lot. Um, yeah. And so I've done a little bit of it. You'll see just a tiny bit of embroidery on my work later. Are you using like things like embroider hoops and and what kind of stitch are you using for all those lettering?
Yeah, great question. No, I don't use a hoop in any of my work. Typically, the smaller I work, the more I'll end up using a machine. And then my bigger quilts, like those two map quilts were entirely done by hand, like all hand needle turn applique and then hand quilting. And I researched some different methods and I use what is way more ergonomic for me. I use like a 3-inch long needle.
Mm.
It's sold as a soft doll sculpture needle.
I have some of those, yeah.
Okay. And then I make my own leather palm thimbles, and those are
Oh,
designed after the like Japanese sashiko embroidery.
oh.
Which those thimbles are often metal, and I just found that leather is a lot more comfortable. And so with that, you're like using this long needle and it's resting in your palm, and you use that to like push it through the fabric. And I end up just using that for all of my sewing. I feel really awkward if I try to sew without my palm thimble now.
So
Um,
how large the piece that I'm thinking of that had uh
yeah.
I think Lake Superior and Lake Michigan maybe were in there, and then all the hand. What scale is that? Because I was imagining that the letters are like this big, but maybe it's bigger than I think.
No, it's 12 by 16
Oh, okay,
inches.
so it's small.
Yep.
So you're using that technique with that size? Oh, but
Mhm.
you're going through thick. Yeah. Your fabric is thicker though than what it.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes.
Yeah, and I'm going through like all of my work that I stretch over a canvas, I still use batting. I'll often use like a wool felt. Um, and because it, like texture is really important
Mm,
just in so many other art forms.
mm.
And so using that like thicker batting helps to give that same texture.
I'm curious about you saying that you had a
Shea,
background
it's good to
in.
see you. Last time I saw you was about 30 years ago. How are how are Cher and Charlie doing in up near Walworth? My wife and your mother worked together. Do you remember that?
You broke up a lot, but
I
I heard
guess
enough to
not.
hear that you know my mom.
We, uh, you were my wife worked for National Wildlife and Ads Inc. in Milwaukee. And
Oh,
the last time I saw you, you were about at the age when you were
you cut out
none.
again.
So and my yeah, when I saw as opposed to me, there are two Jack pajamas. Did I cut out again?
Oh yeah.
Okay, right now it's silent, so I can't hear anything. Okay. Well, it's good to see you because I figured it could only be one of you, and I was
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Shay, so you said you have a water science background. I'm just curious, did you end up going into that career-wise and like I don't know, art it was sort of on the side, like it happens with many of us, or did you find your way to art and then you just took that kind of original, another passion and worked it into your art?
I've like been creative and been like making things my whole life that I haven't stopped doing that. So I've made quilts my whole life. I have just like done a lot of different sewing. I've also like screen printed and love that as a form of art. A lot of what I like to do is like involve community in different things. And so in Milwaukee, like I came up with this idea of like spray chalked intersection murals and created a whole project in the River West Harambe neighborhoods of like creating these huge intersection murals. And so, but I didn't necessarily consider myself an artist, even though people around me were telling me I was. And so it really has been the last like 3 years that um that I kind of turned that corner with my work and just had more time to dedicate to it and have like leaned into some different areas that just are like my home now.
Mhm. Awesome. So there's definitely that family aspect of you learning quilting to your mom, your grandma. You mentioned a kid or kids. Do you think you're going to pass down the technique to them as well?
Kids are 5 and 7, and my 7-year-old is like interested in sewing.
Oh,
So that feels nice.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think the last thing maybe I'll share too is like I find it fascinating with like sewing and quilting and textile art, this tension that exists between like, is it craft and is it art? And like
Mhm.
it's a funny world to straddle between these two, between yeah, art and quilting. And it feels also exciting that I think like there's more recognition for just quilting being an art form. But I do feel really appreciative that like your organization has recognized textile art as an art form. So thanks.
Speaking for myself, I always hated that delineation between fine arts and craft. And I know there's people out there that disagree with me, but there's a lot of things in this world that is an art form. So I will always go to bat for the quote unquote crafts.
Mm.
Okay. Okay, I had one more, not a question, but a comment that I wrote down. I loved the small like 6x6 pieces that you showed us that were, you kind of referred to them almost as like diaries, like textile diaries. And I just wanted to say, like, immediately I got this vision, like, wouldn't it be cool if you attempted to do like one of those pages per day and then you ended up with like this tactile book like diary? That would just be satisfying.
Yeah.
Not that you need to do that, but that's what my head went.
With that, I was reading about another artist the other week, and they refer to their quilts as a form of like 3D sculptural art, and I think that that is just another really interesting idea to consider. Of like, it can be, hung on the wall, stretched over canvas, but then often, they're like used objects, and like the textile like feel of them is so important, and so. I don't know, just another neat component of textiles.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions or comments before we pop on over to our next one?
I just want to say I really love your work, and I'm in Madison, and I remember seeing that notice about Art Lit Lab show, and I probably just got busy and forgot. So I'm going to get down there and see it. So
Great.
glad that you're in there. Looks good.
How long is it up for?
Until April 18th.
Nice, about a month. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much, Shea, for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Jack, I think we have you next. Jack is our Southeast chapter member for today. Are you ready to go?
Oh, I'm always ready, Shannon. Silly question.
Fantastic. The
Okay, let me
Wisconsin
get into
Jack
screen.
Pachuta.
Let me get into screen share here and see if I can find. I've got a PowerPoint like we all do, and I'm trying to find it here.
Sounds good.
I thought I had it all set. Let's see. Talk about myself and some of my background because this may start to sound like a Ken Burns documentary, and you wouldn't want that. Hold on a second. I had it up. Yeah, my wife used to work for National Wildlife and Ads Inc. and that's where Shea Schachameyer and my wife were working together. Let's see if we can get this up. I've got the PowerPoint. Now we just got to make sure that we can see it on the screen. Hold on a second. Let me get back to you. Normally, I'm much better than this. My nimble fingers normally work much better than this, but the older you get, the less your nimble fingers work, unfortunately. Let's see. Thank you for chuckling. That's a nice interlude. Let's see.
I'm here for you, Jack.
You know, I apparently I'm in twice because I'm getting these messages that say I'm already on this. So let's see.
Oh, it's your clone again?
My clone. All the world loves a clone.
Jack, did you used to teach?
You know, I've got it up on my screen, but I can't see. I'm in twice in this meeting. Here. If not, you might want to move on in the screen. You know what? Why don't we let me figure this out? Why I'm in twice? Hold on.
That's the goofiest thing. I truly did not know that was possible.
And then maybe we'll be able to get this done. Okay.
Do you want me to go over to Katherine to go second and have you go third?
Unless I can show this is not going to make much sense. So maybe if you want to move on, yeah, it's possible. I've had this happen before, not with me, but with other people that I've been on Zoom with, that they sign in twice, and suddenly, you have two images, and that's not a good thing. Why don't you move on? Let me. I want. Yeah, why don't you do that? I'm going to stop sharing and just say, well, why don't you move on and come back to me? How's that?
Okay.
Sounds
all right.
good. Okay,
right,
then we're moving over to South Central with Katherine.
I cannot get to the PowerPoint on this particular connection, but I see that my name is somewhere else.
Okay.
In here.
Do you see my screen?
I can see it.
So I probably have two different sign-ons.
Okay.
That's because I'm twice as
Jack's going to have to mute himself or he'll continually override the presentation.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Okay, let me work this out.
I'll wait, Jack. I think he was saying you should mute yourself. Shannon, I don't know if you can mute him.
Oh, let me see.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Okay, great. All right, let's see. So, all right, let me go ahead and start. Sorry. All right, so I'm Katherine Steichen Rosing. I know some of you, well, I know Tori actually. And I'd like to thank Shannon for organizing the talks. I think it's a great idea. And thank you for inviting me to speak. And thanks to everybody who's here. I live in Madison and I make abstract symbolic paintings and immersive installations that examine interconnections between forests, watershed, and climate that are often hidden. I'm going to start by talking about my paintings. So this is a little bit older. I've been painting for decades, so it would be here for many hours if I went back that far. So I'm going to start with this one that's at this point, 7 years old. This is an example of one of my largest forest paintings, and it's one of the most representational. I'm going to reference back to this one later when I get to my installations. So for a couple of decades, I explored themes related to forests and water in separate bodies of work that straddled the edge between abstraction and representation. In recent years, I was seeking a way forward to a visual language that fused these themes, but I wasn't quite sure how to go about it. My water paintings tended to be quite abstract, referencing water as a symbol of life and eternity, while the forests were kind of an exploration of community and ecosystems. I had two artist-based residencies, one in Minnesota along the St. Croix River and one at the Trout Lake Research Station. And these two artists, these were, I think, a year apart. They helped me to develop a more holistic vision of these ecosystems and looking how they were entwined. In one residency, I studied connections between trees and rivers. And in the other, the Trout Lake residency, I started to think about other life forms that exist in forested watersheds. And it began a series that I call Water Shields and Damselflies. This is one of the first one in that series. These were inspired by the water shield plant and the damselfly, which is like a kind of baby cousin of the dragonfly. And I learned about these at the Trout Lake residency. So I started working with ovals referencing the water shield plant and used them overlapping and interacting with the vertical bands that suggest trees, but in a kind of a non-literal space. There's inscriptions and marks in the background that reference the damselfly. And I work in acrylic. I started as an oil painter many decades ago. When I was pregnant, I couldn't keep working with the fumes and things, so switched to acrylic and ended up really loving it. So I work on canvas. More recently now, I worked on panel for a long time. And for this body of work, and probably the last 5 years, I often start with an orange underpainting, which is the color of the inner bark and the smallest roots. Then I paint an initial layer of the stripes, and I'm working in sections because acrylic, of course, dries really quickly. And I use a variety of tools like knitting needles, pencils, or bamboo pens, and other things to draw lines or symbols that scrape down to the underpainting, exposing the original orange. Each painting is built up in many layers, so with each layer, I have to retrace or repaint the fine lines and marks. Sometimes the marks remain buried, and the building up of the texture, building up of all the layers of color, and the continued mark making builds a richly textured surface that I'm obsessed with, along with color. So this painting is 66 by 53 inches. Working with acrylic that way was challenging. I could only work on a small area at a time. I had to keep pushing the wet boundaries before they, like, a kind of a row or a column, like only part way, and then I kind of keep the edges wet. And it was really tough working that way. So around 2023, I started consistently using Golden's open acrylics, which significantly extend the drying time. Gives me a lot more time to make the incised lines, and it opened up a broader way of working with the paint. It's kind of like a hybrid between acrylic and oil. John Muir, the famous naturalist and environmental advocate, wrote, "When one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world." And I try to remember this while creating my work because it's often the least visible that is the most important. Like even mosquitoes, none of us probably think of them as our favorite insects, but they are food for damselflies. They have food for fish and birds and all kinds of other creatures. So they're really important. The oval shapes have come to symbolize a variety of life forms, from plants to birds to insects, and I start breaking them up and doing different things with the ovals. Around 2024, I became obsessed with atmospheric rivers, which are extreme erratic weather patterns caused by climate change. They're long serpentine cloud masses that carry tremendous quantities of water, as much as the Amazon River. And they carry that aloft and pass over narrow bands of land, just pouring rain over the same area for days, flooding those areas but depriving others of other areas of moisture. I started to think of them as climate spirits. And so in my recent paintings, the last couple of years, they often appear like arcs or kind of these, curvilinear forms in what would be the sky area, sometimes in the water. I was thinking about the impact of these erratic weather patterns on our forests and on those beautiful small clear lakes that I love up in the north. After learning how mosquitoes lay their eggs by watching a video, I often study how things work. It was a pretty cool video, and I just developed some shapes to reference the mosquito larvae. These little things right here are referencing mosquito larvae, so they're kind of scattered throughout the painting. Here, the ovals are suggesting disturbances on the water surfaces, possibly from little insect tails dipping their tails in the water as they lay their eggs. That's how damselflies lay their eggs as well. While the lines suggest both roots, some of the lines are roots and some of the lines are insect flight patterns. When the forest holds its breath, considers drought and its aftermath, fire, and then the impact of these fires on the rest of the ecosystem. While listening to the last rain, imagines an atmospheric river overhead, capriciously dropping rain while other areas burn. I continue to make paintings that celebrate life and hope, like this one, Susan's Stories, and the positive energy that we experience when in nature, but with sometimes a little bit of foreboding, like that orange on the horizon, which for me is key to this painting. It can be interpreted in multiple ways. Susan's Stories refers back to one of the scientists I spoke with at Trout Lake Residency, who taught me about the water shield plants. That sense of foreboding I mentioned is stronger in this transitional piece between the atmospheric river paintings and some new imagery. So here the trees are in that sort of watery foreground, but they're immersed in the water. I've started a new series that I call Drowning Forests that will be included in a solo show at Kim Storage Gallery in Milwaukee that opens in mid-April. I had an intense kayaking experience in a flooded area a few years ago that kind of underlies this series. You know, while flooding is devastating, like so many things, there's still beauty in the destruction. And I love the looking at the reflections and kind of playing with those ripples. Sometimes floods recede quickly and maybe the trees do fine, but I wonder about the long-term effect on the forests because trees, the roots need oxygen to survive. So about 7 years ago is around the time I started making some really large paintings, maybe a little bit further back than that. Some of these paintings like Resonance that I showed you earlier, the first painting, some of those were up to 10 feet wide. I was trying to make such a big painting that the viewer was immersed in the forest. And I had a vision for an installation and some tall drawings that would physically surround the viewer more than the paintings could. So I wrote and submitted a proposal to Able Contemporary, and it was accepted. So I made a series of scroll drawings for this installation, used graphite sticks, like very soft graphite, and made rubbings of hundreds of leaves inside a contour line of a tree trunk. I see this as documenting trees which are still present, but under threat from logging or other environmental stresses. On the back of the drawings, you can see this is one where on the back, chlorophyll actually got rubbed off, and you could see it on the back from the pressure of rubbing the leaves. So that a little bit of this yellowish color all the way through here and a little bit there. And so when it happened, I was really excited because my goal here was to memorialize these trees that we're losing. Many of these trees are expected to be lost from the northern forest by the end of this century. And when the chlorophyll is deposited on the back, it contains DNA from that tree, so it truly memorializes its existence. So this is that installation, my first one, called Vigil, a memorial to the old growth forests we have lost. I sewed a group of sheer off-white fabric trees, creating a spirit forest, honoring the trees that we lost as our country was colonized. And I just kind of raced through the land just almost with this passion to just civilize the country. The scroll drawings were arranged along the walls of the gallery like a formal procession. And the species that were selected that I selected to work with predominantly in this show were species that were like maple, hemlock, and yellow birch, which was a community that was growing in the Van Vliet Hemlock Preserve, which is an small, old growth forest in northeastern Wisconsin, which inspired this installation. My next installation was Emeralds to Ashes, which was a really significant project for me that explored the relationship between the invasive emerald ash borer beetle and the ash tree. I took a holistic approach and studied the beetle's life cycle and its relationship to the ash tree and made a new series of scroll drawings based on the ash and its components like the bark, the leaves, and the branches, and made rubbings of all of those. I sewed a dozen new tree sculptures, and this time I beaded and embroidered abstract patterns that symbolize the beetle's life cycle on sheer black fabric. And these are 11 feet tall. So the tree in the foreground, the diamond pattern that you see, that's yarn that I hand stitched through 12 feet by 12 feet of fabric, which was kind of insane. And because it's very stretchy. This is like a tulle fabric, like very lightweight, stretchy fabric. And then I went around the city and I made stump rubbings from the trees that were cut down by the city of Madison all across the boulevard. You guys have probably all seen this happen in your areas as well. And then so there's a grid of some of those stumps, and then there was a map over here where people could look at like what address did that come from. And then I held workshops in schools, both in the college I taught at and middle school, where some of the staff and the students could do a little bit of embroidery and some of the beading. So here's an example of one of those trees. This is a detail from the serpentine tree that shows the patterns that are chewed beneath the bark by the larvae, which is what kills the trees because it cuts off the water supply and the nutrients from the roots. And then here's one of the scroll drawings. Blue ash. I documented 4 different species of ash working with the UW-Madison Arboretum so that I could tell which tree was which, because ash leaves look very, very similar to each other. So I knew that I was documenting the right species. And then the next exhibition, I took some of those white spirit trees and the black trees from Emeralds to Ashes and put them together for a new installation exploring the relationship between trees and climate, in particular, trees, climate, and the relationship to the atmosphere, because trees are inextricably entwined with the carbon cycle and the water cycle. And I wondered, like, what if we could see oxygen, water vapor, and carbon? If we could see it, would it make us more conscious of our contributions to the changing climate? So suspended between the tree sculptures are over 100 strands of what I call atmosphere particles, made by cutting small pieces from plastic bottles and then black takeout containers that I got from the community. And these are threaded on a multicolor monofilament, and so they're hung between the trees where people could walk in between the trees. There was a path mark that they could walk through. And I hope that by envisioning the atmosphere, that people would think about things like maybe imagine the forest breathing in impurities like carbon and respiring out fresh, clean air, and that we share that breath with them. So hopefully by seeing the atmosphere and some of the black particles, I was hoping that people would also take away that each one of us needs to find ways to change our habits. This piece is called Prophecy, and this was made by rubbing India ink onto ribbons of Tyvek, symbolizing the carbon that's held in trees, while the transition to white at the top questions whether forests will survive. For me, white often symbolizes death, while black symbolizes carbon, a building block of life. So that same sculpture was the centerpiece of this installation, which was at Able Contemporary Gallery about 3 years ago. Inhale and exhale until the last breath takes another look at climate threats to forested ecosystems, but I included painting and sculpture. The color in the paintings contrasts with the monochrome sculptures, like the juxtaposition of the exuberance I feel in daily interactions with the natural world, but balanced with the climate anxiety that intrudes on that joy. So on the right wall is a video being projected, and on the left, some other sculptures that I made for this show. So the video was filmed in forests in Dane County, starting with a quiet hike through a forest. And then over time, throughout the 8 minutes of the video lasts, I've got invented imagery. There's some bubbles and some other things, and then wildfire footage layered and kind of interwoven with the local forests. For the same exhibition, I made these pieces I called Sentinels, and I began using fire as a tool and India ink as a literal symbol of carbon amid an extended period of drought and forest fires in southern Wisconsin. Working with flame became a meditation on the impact of oxygen, fuel, and temperature. Ironically, at the time I was finishing this work in my driveway, Madison had been experiencing years of drought, and we had high winds, prompting red flag warnings in my area, meaning no more outdoor burning. So I finished them very, very carefully in my basement with a fire extinguisher handy, spray bottles, and I worked on a piece of metal. At the same time, forest fires were burning across the state, which made the work feel ever more relevant. And there's a detail from those pieces. So you can see these are made with India ink on a linen gauze, and these are the holes that were burned in the linen. I began exploring drought and its impact on trees through this piece as well, which some of you might have seen at the biennial 2 years ago. So this is called Entanglements, and it explores the connections between trees and the water cycle. It's surrounded by sisal twine because the color and the really hairy texture of that sisal is very root-like. And then interspersed among in the twine are glass vessels that I always fill with water collected from whatever nearby water source. In this case, it was the Wisconsin River. And then the idea is that the water from the vessels evaporates over time, returns to the atmosphere like the water vapor that's respired through the leaves on a real tree. trees, like humans, are about 60% water. So this piece imagines a tree as a column of water surrounded by, and I borrowed the atmospheric particles I had created for the other exhibition. So it's looking at the tree as a column of water and then its relationship to the atmosphere. And finally, my most recent site-specific installation, Atmospheric Apparitions, explores erratic precipitation patterns amplified by climate change. So here I'm thinking about those atmospheric rivers that appear in my paintings. And it's my first venture into cyanotype printing ever. And I started working on a large scale on cotton gauze in lengths up to 30 feet. So it was kind of insane and very stressful. But it was fun. On the cascade section on the right, I embroidered locations of fatal flooding events like Valencia, Spain, and Kerrville, Texas. So you can see some of the hand embroidery here and back here. And then interspersed among the cloud-like forms are hand-blown glass droplets that are filled with either sand or water. You know, the idea is questioning, like, is this big storm passing my area, leaving it perpetually in drought, or will it drop rain and will we be, refreshed and our water supply replenished? So that's my last image, and I just wanted to let you know about some exhibitions. So right now, I have a show, a two-person show at the Overture Center for the Arts, open through May 31st. And so some of the paintings that you saw, like was When the Forest Holds Its Breath, the fire painting, and the atmospheric river with the spiral, those are in that show right now. And then I'm working towards this, which is coming up really soon, the solo show at Kim Storage, where I hope to have an installation, a modified installation of that cyanotype piece. And then the atmospheric river, or the drowning forests will be a dominant theme in that exhibition, along with some of the water shields and damselfly paintings. And then I'm super excited about a show coming up in Washington, D.C., where I'll have an installation that will, I'm building on maybe I'll just run back here if I can do it fast enough. These pieces here, I'm going to fill an entire gallery with about 36 of those pieces, and then hopefully have a video that accompanies it. So that's at the Hillier Gallery in Washington, D.C. So that's it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And do you want me to stop sharing, Shannon, while I'm...
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
There.
Okay. And then I'll just unpin you real quick. So one thing that I really liked about some of the paintings that you began with, you were talking about some of the shapes and imagery on the paintings representing maybe more than one thing, like, tree roots, but it also could be flight paths of insects. And, you talked about the ovals representing multiple things. And I just wanted to comment that it made me think about, how many different patterns and shapes and things are repeated all throughout nature between plants, animals, at the macroscopic and microscopic level. So even thinking about the ovals, I'm like, yeah, what else it looks like? It kind of looks like amoebas. And so I started making all these different sorts of connections with the shapes that you were describing.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I've heard that before. It never occurred to me that they might be, especially the rings, the open hoops, the open ovals, and people have said that they do remind them of microscopic creatures or like things you'd see in the water. And I haven't yet thought about that too much, but it's really interesting because one of the things I'm just really interested in how interconnected everything really is. Like, you really can't take things apart. And that's what we're kind of facing that now, where we're losing so many species and the conditions are changing so much.
I think it was very interesting how you use cyanotype. I do alternative photography processes, and so to do cyanotype on such a large scale, and for your first time, it turned out spectacularly.
It was insane. I have to say, it's
I'm
absolutely
sure.
insane. But yeah, I did. Do you know? Oh gosh, I'm tired. What's her name? There's a there's a woman here in Madison who teaches cyanotype workshops, and so I talked to
Angela, I
and
think.
Angela Johnson. Yeah, so she loaned me some chemicals. Like before, I just did some test pieces on a small scale. I thought, yeah, I can do this, but yeah, it's and then I talked to Terry Warpinski
Mhm.
who because I was starting to the whole idea of covering that much fabric in the dark and I had to hang it to dry in my studio. So like and then like it's dark, like I can't see much and I've got all this junk in my studio. And then like what was I going to do? How am I going to get it outside fast enough, 30 feet long and not have it simultaneously like expose it so fast, 10 minutes. And so she gave me the idea of rolling it in black landscape plastic and so it still was really intense. I had people helping me and I had, instructions and we rehearsed it, but to unroll it and then try to like lay things out and keep on rolling and laying things out and think compositionally, like there was barely any time. I used popcorn and all kinds of like it's raindrop like. Yeah, but yeah, I should talk to you and look at your work because so do you do cyanotype?
I have done it in the past. Lately, I've been working with chemograms.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
That's where you take black and white photographic paper and you apply a different resist to the paper, and then you put the paper through the darkroom chemistry, the developer and the fixer, and go back and forth and build up layers. And so I create imagined landscapes using the chemogram
Oh,
process.
wow. Oh, that sounds great. I love layered things. I'm ready. I'm taking notes. Yeah.
Michael, I can see you talking, but you are muted.
Thank you. I had to mute because the dogs got a little noisy. Um, I don't have any questions, but I love your work. And, um, the thing, a lot of times, there are some work that artists do that has a lot of conceptual context behind the painting or the sculpture or whatever. And if you don't understand the context, it's very hard to appreciate the work. Whereas the paintings that were shown earlier, each of them, regardless of what the viewer might interpret they're looking at, stands up beautifully in terms of, on its own visually.
Oh,
Uh,
thank
and
you. Yeah,
and
thank you.
the use of color, the shapes, the patterns. As you were describing what some of it meant, I saw different things than you were describing, but it still all makes sense.
Oh,
And
that's good to
so,
hear. Yeah,
yeah, it's beautiful work.
thank you. Yeah, I worry sometimes about, I mean, I guess for me, I have to have a meaning. Like I need besides, I absolutely love painting. Like I love color, surface, texture. I just love and making things. But I need a reason, I guess. I don't know. I've always needed that. But I know that it's not going to be obvious to people. So I do, and I like it when people read different things because often, I can't think of an example right now, but often they got something that I didn't realize I was putting there. Like it changed how I looked at it.
Real quick, can you talk about color choices in some of those paintings? Is there any specific intention behind how you kind of bend reality a little bit? It's almost some of them almost enter like I'm going to call it like a psychedelic territory,
Yeah.
a very, very interesting feeling that comes from it.
Um, Color choices. It's hmm. To some extent, sometimes well, the orange I use intentionally because like I said before, it is like if you scrape a little bit of like bark off, especially a newer tree, you'll see orange. And so it's kind of the color of the cambium. And then it's also the complement of blue. And so, and I love color and I love saturated color. and I love complementary contrast. So on some of the paintings, like I'm trying to think of how many, like at Overture right now, I have 3 deep blue and sort of blue-green paintings. There's one of them that was in the slides. And then there's orange at the horizon. And that orange I'm using expressively as a threat. Now, I think people could maybe think it's a sunset or sunrise, which is okay. But to me, that orange is threatening. But it's also very like exciting. Like I love that blue-orange contrast. And then like the layering, when I'm layering it, like there's, which you can't see, I didn't show enough details, but um, there's a lot of subtlety. Like I think because I was very nearsighted until I had cataract surgery, like extremely nearsighted. So I could see things like, that far away well. And so I think that sort of, I just got really into like looking closely at things. And so I get very involved in what's happening right up on the surface, right here in front of my face, and have to remind myself to step back and see how the whole thing works. So by layering it, there's a lot, to me, it's very exciting to see all the little details of the bits of color that gets layered and sandwiched in. Like there's probably 5 or 6, at least 5 or 6 layers on almost every painting. But some of the changes are, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question right, but sometimes the color is symbolic, sometimes it is more intuitive, sometimes it's a reaction to what I'm getting tired of working with the same colors and I just want to see what it's like. That pink painting, I don't think I did put the pink painting in there, I think, quickening. I don't particularly like pink, but pink is like, I thought, well, I'm not going to use red, and I wanted the trees to be green. I haven't actually figured out why the trees are green. I don't know, other than it's a color filled with life, and the yellow green against that blue of the drowning forest is so vivid, which I'm excited about. But
You just described really stood out to me, and I love your work, and that one is just gorgeous.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
powerful.
Okay, anybody else? Okay,
Thank you
so
very
much,
much.
Katherine. Absolutely love it. I think I've only seen one piece in person so far, but as always, like pictures don't do it justice. Like
No.
the detail that you can see up close and personal, and like with the paintings, that scraping you do, it's just texturally delicious in person.
Texturally delicious. I'll have to work that into a statement.
Yeah, you can quote me.
Yeah, there we go. Love that.
Oh, goodness.